Hi there, welcome to Oaklandside 510. I'm Tasneem Raja, Editor-in-Chief of the Oaklandside, Oakland's independent nonprofit newsroom. This week's main story, investigative reporter Beck Klein and news editor Darwin BondGraham walk us through the results of a major investigation into overtime spending at the Oakland Police Department and what has changed since we reported. Later in this episode, Oakland's speed cameras are now issuing real tickets, and we have data on where the worst speeding is happening, the latest on layoffs at OUSD. Oakland City Council votes unanimously on supporting gender-affirming care. A new women's professional football team kicks off their inaugural season right here in Oakland this month. Plus, food news, the Oakland Marathon, and more. All right, let's get into our main story today. If you have been following our newsroom's reporting over the last few months, you may have seen our widely read investigation into overtime spending at the Oakland Police Department. It's a story that starts with one officer's astonishing paycheck. And since our reporting was published, there have been real changes in how OPD handles overtime. I'm joined today by our news editor, Darwin BondGraham, and investigative reporter Beck Klein. They worked on this investigation, which is a partnership between the Oaklandside and the investigative reporting program at UC Berkeley. Beck, Darwin, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Tasneem.
Hey, Tasneem.
Okay, Beck, let's start at the beginning. You've been covering OPD's overtime spending for a while now. For people who haven't been following this, what's the problem?
So the short version is OPD has been overspending its overtime budget every single year for at least the past 6 years, sometimes by tens of millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Last fiscal year, the department spent over $55 million on overtime, and $31 million of that was over budget. And this isn't a new problem. The city auditor flagged it in 2015, again in 2019, and again in 2022. The recommendations kept piling up, and substantively, very little change.
Right. So the question becomes, what happens to the rest of the community that needs social services? What happens to city departments that need to stay open? You know, we've been seeing city workers whose positions have been getting frozen over the last few years. So this has been a real tension, right? The city keeps cutting dozens of civilian positions to balance its budget while police overtime keeps climbing. So you guys decided to dig into the numbers. What did you find?
Well, we started looking at individual officers' pay, and one name kept jumping out. Lieutenant Timothy Dolan, a 26-year veteran of the department who leads OPD's traffic unit. In 2024, Dolan was paid nearly $500,000 in overtime alone. His total paycheck, salary plus overtime and other pay, came out to about $711,000. That's nearly double what the chief of police makes, and almost 3 times the mayor's salary.
It's $500,000 in overtime going to one police officer.
Exactly. To put it in context, in 2021, 58 officers each made over $100,000 in overtime. But by the end of 2024, that number had nearly tripled to 169 officers. And 27 officers that year made over $200,000 each in overtime.
So Dolan wasn't alone, but he was the most extreme example of something that was happening more frequently at OPD.
By a lot.
Okay, what was Dolan actually doing during all those hours? Do we know?
That's where it gets complicated and where we discovered whole new problems that haven't been getting much attention. The biggest documented chunk, over 800 hours of overtime, was spent reviewing traffic collision reports. Paperwork, essentially, checking vehicle codes, formatting, style corrections, that kind of thing. Dolan is the department's designated subject matter expert on collisions, and OPD had a backlog of reports to get through. The department says he's one of only 2 officers who handle most of these reviews, but lots of other officers are allowed to. But here's the thing. Because his rank as lieutenant puts him near the top of OPD's salary scale, having him do that work on overtime is particularly expensive.
Okay, Darwin, I want to come to you. You cover City Hall and public safety closely. How did all of this fit into the bigger picture of Oakland's budget crisis?
It's really central to it. The city closed a $265 million deficit last year by cutting across departments. And yet, for the new 2-year budget, the city actually increased its police overtime allocation to $72 million. That's a record amount. And even that might not be enough to cover what OPD actually spends if the pattern continues. Civilian unions representing non-police city employees, they put out a report last year that found something counterintuitive. Even when OPD staffing increased, overtime kept going up. So for example, they found that from 2011 to 2024, staffing went up by about 9%, but overtime shot up by almost 200%. The police union disputes this framing. The union's president says the staffing shortage is the core driver, that officers don't want to work all this overtime, but they're forced to. But the union analysis, the one the civilian employees put together with the department's own data, that seems to tell a more complicated story.
Right. Look, we get into all of this in depth in a previous episode of this podcast. We'll link to it in the show notes. Listener, if you want to get into all of the nitty gritty of, Lieutenant Dolan, his work, what he was doing, how we made sense of it, I definitely urge you to check out that episode. I want to get now to what's changed, the latest developments. Beck, after you published this investigation, there was pretty swift reaction. What happened?
So a few things happened. OPD told us they opened an investigation. Mayor Lee said she was concerned by the findings and was monitoring the situation.
Mm-hmm.
We also noticed something funny. Lieutenant Dolan's photo and biography were removed from the police union's website.
Mm-hmm.
Right, he had been serving as vice president of the union. The union told Beck that what actually happened was Dolan decided not to run for re-election before we had published our story, but the change happened afterward.
Yeah. And then, more recently, interim police chief James Beer announces some significant new policy changes, right?
Right. In mid-February, Beer issued what's called a special order. It cancels all discretionary overtime.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is officers and commanders can no longer decide on their own to work extra unplanned overtime hours. Now they need approval from the chief's office. And in cases where commanders want to allocate additional overtime to specific areas of the city, they have to back that up with data, crime rates, citizen complaints. Beer also put in place new requirements for officers to document their overtime after the fact, emailing supervisors to explain what they did on their shift so that there's a record even if the paper forms go missing, which we found they do a lot.
This sounds like a real change from how things have worked before, right? I mean, that is just fair to say.
It is, yeah. Under the old policy, police officers generally didn't need prior approval before extending their shifts. And for like a few other kinds of overtime, that's how you get situations like the one Beck described. But now there's supposed to be a real chain of command in place. Chief Beer was pretty direct about it at the city council committee meeting. He said officers cannot just arbitrarily start working overtime and close out cases without approval from the chain of command.
It's my understanding that our reporting was directly referenced at that meeting. Help us understand the chain of events here between our story getting published and this committee hearing and, this change to the policy.
Well, this meeting was actually scheduled in response to our reporting. After the investigation came out, Council member Charlene Wong from District 2 requested an informational memo from OPD about how they manage their overtime internally.
And Councilmember Rowena Brown called the new overtime policy a good first step, but she said she's waiting on this digitized tracking system before she's really going to be satisfied.
Right. Beck, according to your reporting, this tracking system, this lack really of a tracking system has been a really big problem. From what we learned, from your earlier story, OPD still doesn't have a fully computerized scheduling system. A lot of this stuff is tracked on paper. I know that really surprised a lot of readers of your story.
Right. And it's a big problem for the department. It's one of the main things they point to as being a big obstacle for getting overtime under control. The department's been trying to build this new real-time digital tracking system for overtime for years. But at one point, they scrapped what they had. Now they say they're making progress again, and that a system that could keep an eye on all the overtime that's used might be online. But they're saying the earliest that could happen would be December of next year.
Yeah.
Councilmember Charlene Wong raised concerns about that timeline, though. And it sounds like City Administrator Justin Johnson was candid that even that timeline might slip because Oakland's existing financial systems are just so outdated.
Look, we're seeing a lot of, conversation really scrutinizing these systems, really scrutinizing the ways that this very, very large amount of money gets tracked. This is the kind of story, ever since we launched this newsroom, overtime comes up constantly, right? As like a sort of perennial, everybody knows that there's a problem, but they disagree on what causes that problem. They disagree on exactly, why it's such a problem. I can't help but think it's good and healthy that Oakland is having this conversation with the level of information that is out there, and certainly wasn't a few months ago. From a journalism standpoint, Beck, what does it mean to you to see that your reporting is certainly playing some real role in forcing that conversation and spurring real change?
Well, it's really what you hope for when you do this kind of work. We spent months on this, multiple budget cycles, audit reports, public records fights. And it took a concrete, specific example, one officer, one paycheck, missing records, to make it land in a way that required a response. The city auditor has been raising the alarm for years. The civilian unions put out their own analysis, but sometimes you need the specific to illuminate the systemic.
And sometimes that's where we come in. Darwin, where do you think this story goes from here?
Yeah, there's several things to watch. One is whether the new overtime controls actually reduce spending. We'll see that in financial updates and budget documents later this year. Two is the digital tracking system we were just talking about. Whether it actually gets built and whether it solves the record keeping problem is something to keep an eye on. Third is the OPD investigation prompted by Beck's reporting. We were told by the Oakland Police Department that they opened some kind of investigation after that story came out. We still don't know what kind of investigation that is or what the goal is, but it's something we want to learn.
Yep.
The broader question of staffing, the city and OPD both say that the shortage of officers is a driver of overtime. Mayor Lee has plans to increase the number of officers. Whether that actually reduces overtime or whether, as the civilian employee union's analysis suggests, it doesn't, that's something we'll be watching very closely.
Darwin, Beck, thank you for this work. Thank you for staying on it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tasneem.
You can find all of Beck's reporting on OPD overtime at oaklandside.org. We'll link to the full investigation, our previous episode, and any latest updates in the show notes. Let's get into some other recent reporting from our newsroom. There's more in the full stories, which we'll link to in the show notes, and you can always find at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletter if you want to get our reporting in your inbox. First up, our reporters Azucena Racia and Eli Wolf sat down with Congresswoman Lateefah Simon for a wide-ranging interview about what it's like representing Oakland in a Republican-dominated Congress. Simon talked about healthcare, immigration enforcement, the war with Iran, transgender rights, and what she thinks Democrats need to do if they win back the House in the midterms. She said healthcare justice is her top priority, and she's been focused on protecting funding for institutions like Children's Hospital Oakland and UC Berkeley's CRISPR lab. On immigration, Simon said she's one of the first African-American members of Congress to say there's no reforming ICE, and that she'll advocate for defunding the agency. She talked about her trip to Minneapolis to visit the site where ICE volunteer observer Renee Good was killed, and said her office is in constant communication with local leaders to prepare for federal enforcement actions in the East Bay. She also spoke about the importance of fighting sex trafficking. She's working with Oakland City Council member Charlene Wong on that issue and about her relationship with big tech, saying every good sector needs some regulation, especially around child safety and AI. It's a great interview. Check it out at oaklandside.org. Okay, our next story. As of this past Sunday, Oakland's speed cameras are no longer just sending warnings. They're issuing real tickets. Jose Fermoso reports that during the 5-week warning period, the cameras sent out 140,000 warning letters to the owners of about 74,000 unique vehicles. The city released data showing which streets had the worst speeding. Broadway, between 27th and 28th Street, topped the list with over 21,000 warnings. 73rd Avenue, between Fresno and Krause, was second, with nearly 18,000, and Hagenberger Road came in third, with over 15,000. The location where cameras clocked the highest average speeds was Foothill Boulevard, between 19th and 20th Avenues, where hundreds of drivers were exceeding the 25-mile-per-hour limit by nearly 20 miles an hour. Fines will start at $50 for going 11 to 15 miles over the limit, and they will max out at $500 for going 100 or more over. The money will go toward traffic calming measures. Next story. Education reporter Ashley McBride, along with EdSource reporter Diana Lambert, this was a collaboration, published a story putting Oakland's school budget crisis in a statewide context. In late February, the Oakland School Board approved more than 400 layoffs for the next school year. The positions cut deep: school counselors, nurses, literacy tutors, custodians, food service workers, instructional aides, lunchtime supervisors, and restorative justice facilitators. But, as their story shows, Oakland is not alone. Thousands of school employees across California received preliminary pink slips in recent weeks. LA Unified alone issued more than 3,000 notices. Sacramento City Unified sent notices to 800 employees, including everyone working in the district office, even the interim superintendent. Districts across California are being squeezed by falling enrollment, the loss of federal COVID dollars, and rising costs for pensions, healthcare, and special education. In healthcare news, Natalie Ornstein reports that the Oakland City Council voted unanimously on Monday to demand that local hospitals continue providing gender-affirming healthcare, despite pressure from the Trump administration. Oakland City Council members Zach Unger, Rowena Brown, and Charlene Wong authored the resolution, which condemns any provider that preemptively stops or delays access to gender-affirming care before federal rules actually take effect. The resolution carries strong language, but it does not include actual penalties for providers that don't comply. All of this is happening after Kaiser Permanente stopped offering gender-affirming surgeries to patients under 19 last summer, and Sutter temporarily halted gender-affirming services. Both cited pressure from the federal government. California's Attorney General has said that gender-affirming healthcare is protected by the state constitution, and the state has joined lawsuits challenging the Trump administration's actions on this issue. Okay, let's talk about illegal dumping fines. Eli Wolf reports that Mayor Barbara Lee and City Council member Zach Unger have proposed new legislation to significantly increase fines for illegal dumping. First-time violators would pay $1,500, up from $750. A second offense takes you up to $2,500. That's up from $1,000. And a third-time offender can expect to pay $5,000. That's up from $1,500. The legislation would also eliminate a provision that currently resets fines after 3 years, meaning repeat offenders would face escalating penalties no matter how much time passes. Their new rules would also make it a crime to use a vehicle to dump trash, and it would be illegal to haul trash in a vehicle without a license plate. Some exciting sports news. Professional tackle football is back in Oakland. The Golden State Storm, a women's professional football team, kicks off their inaugural season on March 28th at Laney Field. The Storm are the newest team in the Women's National Football Conference. None of the players, coaches, or staff are paid by the team. They're doing this for the love of the game. The team has drawn players from across the country and even from Germany. One player to watch, Dom Stewart, an Oakland native raised on Raiders football, who now coaches track at Skyline High. She's playing running back. The team will wear a helmet decal honoring the late coach John Beam, who was instrumental in helping them secure Laney Field for their home. The Storm will be the first professional tackle football team to play in Oakland since 2019, after the Raiders left for Vegas and the Bay Area Panthers chose San Jose. Tickets are on sale now for their 6-game season, and 3 of those are home games. If you're near Lake Merritt this Sunday, heads up. The 17th annual Oakland Marathon happens on March 22nd. A record 11,000 runners are expected to participate, coming from across the state and as far away as Brazil, India, and France. The full marathon route goes through downtown, up Piedmont Avenue, and out onto the Bay Bridge with a turnaround at Yerba Buena Island. There's going to be a festival at the finish line with a beer garden, taco truck, music, and a kids' fun run. Starts at 11 a.m. Do be aware there will be some significant street closures throughout downtown and around the lake. We've got a full rundown of every closure in our story at oaklandside.org. Okay, some quick food news from Nosh. Kilovolt Coffee has soft opened in West Oakland on 13th Street. They were originally on Mandela Parkway, but lost their lease last year. And a Nicaraguan fritanga called La Cochinita Nica has landed in the Melrose District on Fairfax Avenue, serving sopas, carne asada, and other dishes. Then you've got Sophia's House, a Mexican-American restaurant recently opened on Broadway. And Zoco Fusion opened on 14th Street downtown, serving halal, Mexican, and Mediterranean dishes like tacos and shawarma wraps. Okay, that's it for headlines. We're going to link to all of this reporting in the show notes. That's this week's episode of Oaklandside 510. You can find all the stories we talked about today at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletter to get our reporting delivered straight to your inbox. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast, share it with your friends and neighbors. We're going to keep this show going the more listeners we have. This episode was produced by Mark Nieto and hosted by me, Oaklandside Editor-in-Chief Tasneem Raja. On behalf of our entire newsroom, thank you for showing up for Oakland. We'll see you next week.